This is my 2006 YZ500. This is a barn find bike that I traded for a Kincrome toolkit. I've got a YZ500 kit that's going to go on this bike, and we're going to make this bike pretty special while we're at it. This is a 500 kit, and it has everything that I need to turn this 250 into a modern day fire-breathing 500cc two-stroke. This isn't your average 500cc motor. It's from a bespoke engine manufacturer in Canada. It uses parts from the YZ250 bottom end and combines it with modern technology like a counterbalance shaft and a pneumatic power valve. It comes with brand new cases, cylinder and a head, and once it's all assembled, it's capable of making upwards of 70 horsepower, which promises to be a wild ride. First step in this project is to strip the old bike down and get everything cleaned up and coated before we start the reassembly process. This particular YZ250 had only 50 hours on it, which is pretty low for a 2006, and I was feeling pretty confident that I would be able to reuse everything again. At this point, I was seemingly naively optimistic, as you're about to find out throughout this video. This bike was in an absolute state and we would have to replace near on everything. The bike was now stripped back to a bare frame, and I'd put everything in labelled bags to help me with reassembly later on. The frame was stripped bare and was sent off to be Cerakoted, and then I could start stripping down the motor. I enlisted the help of Stel, the owner of OnPoint Suspension. He knows bikes back to front, and given the cost of the BRC kit, I could not afford to make a mistake, so Stel got the call up to help me out. Time to strip this motor down.
Normally you would take this off first, but I think that sees we're going to have to press it on.
You can see here the scoring on the piston, and unfortunately the barrel looked the same. I think that it ran lean during this bike's last trip to the sand.
Well kids, this is why when you ride at road, you always de-salt your bike, not let it sit in the garage for a long time, because that's what happens.
This bike had been in salt water and left to sit around for near on a decade afterwards.
You really want to pay attention to make sure the hardening isn't starting to deteriorate, come off. It looks like all the dogs and everything are pretty good.
These gears would now be cleaned, and then they were going to get sent off for tumbling to make them near new again.
When the bike sits around for a long period of time and still has a bit of fuel left in the carby, this is the result. Float's completely stuck. Some nice stale fuel, it smells like varnish.
This bike has now been fully stripped back to bare bones, every single nut and bolt. At this point, pretty much everything on the bike had been pulled apart and sent off for coating or cleaning. And a few weeks later, I started to get some of the first parts back, and we could begin by assembling the suspension.
I'm Stel from OnPoint, and I'm a suspension master. So we're just doing a revalve on these KYB forks. They'll come off a 450, so they'll set up for motocross. So we're sort of tailoring it a little bit to suit the two-stroke chassis and obviously do a bit more enduro stuff because that's what you're going to be doing with it. So yeah, just setting it up more for that and obviously your weight and height and stuff like that. So by changing these shims, basically we can change the characteristics of the dampening in the fork. And this setting here I've done so many times that I've got it in my head. I don't actually need to look at the spec card. So I've done it a few times, that's for sure. Basically, we fully stripped the suspension down to basically, as you can see, nothing. This stuff was all a bit worse for wear, but just basically got stuff coated. More for the aesthetic side of it, but also do have some performance coatings here. So we've got a DLC lower fork tubes. So they're actually the same ones that come on the factory KYB fork. It means you're gonna go fast now. A lot of the factory teams and like top level racers will use these kind of coatings to reduce the seal drag and bush drag internally because you've got the two moving parts that are like under load. We've had situations with these where they've reduced so much seal drag that we've had to put heavier springs in for the riders. So it's a pretty cool coating, but the main reason we're using it here is because it looks unreal. Got some Cerakoting done, which is more of an aesthetic thing. Yeah, it just sort of brings everything back to life and gives it a bit more of that factory look. Is a liquid anodizing. Only place in the world that gets done is in Japan. So we've got to send them all the way to Japan to get done. Yeah. So yeah, if anyone wants this sort of stuff done, contact it onpoint and we can send it off and get done. It's got our contact over in Japan, which is cool. Just finished revalving all this. We're going to start piecing together the puzzle and get some sick looking suspension back together.
Up first was the rear shock, and I'd got a lot of the aluminium bits here coated in burnt bronze Cerakote, which I reckon looked pretty good.
With the shim setting that I have for say just your normal YZ500, I would run X amount of shims on the compression stack here, but being a 500, I've decided to go a little bit firmer on the compression dampening because I think having more power there, the bike's going to want to squat harder. So we make the compression valving a little bit firmer to keep that bike from squatting under drive. Otherwise, it would end up becoming unbalanced. Keep the thing neutral. This is basically putting all that assembly into the shock body. We are cycling oil in and out with the goal of getting basically all the air out of the system, as you can see. Reason being is we don't want any air in the oil system at all. It has to be like 100% oil because obviously these shocks get very hot. If we've got any air in there, the air expands. If air goes through the valving, you lose dampening.
What are you doing, Stel?
Putting some nitrogen in the shocky boy.
That's the rear shock done now. We just had to add a spring. Now Stel can get onto the front suspension.
So we are putting together the fork cartridge because we had these tanks recoated as well because they were in pretty bad shape. And then we can start putting the forks back. So nice. We'll bleed out all the air.
Like milking a cow.
Pretty much. Any excess oil, which will generally come out of there. So when we put these lugs on, we've had a lot of situations that lugs have come loose, especially on the brake side, from the brake caliper. These get really hot, so they melt Loctite. So what we do is we actually preheat these. So when we put them on and then tighten them up, once they cool, they actually shrink around the fork tube. Never ever come off, never come loose. Yeah, slippery goodness. So that's the benefit of the Kashima and the DLC. There is like next to no seal drag at all, which means plush, and they look sick.
They look so good.
Yeah, so all done with the big YZ500 build, all the suspension side of it anyways. Forks are done, coated, looking sick, and yeah, if anyone needs stuff done like this, just come see us.
Now that the suspension was done, I had everything that I needed to get the chassis rolling, and the majority of it had been sitting in my living room for a month or so, begging me to put it together. Finally, I could begin. Really exciting day for the YZ500, and everything is back from various coatings and we're ready to assemble. So basically everything aluminium went and got Cerakoted black, everything steel got black zinced. We got the radiators hydroblasted, so they're nice and clean. Forks have gone to Japan, got Kashima coated, the lowers have got DLC coated, the lugs have got anodized, and then there are a lot of new parts which you can see in the front here as well. So really exciting, and we get to assemble this thing finally and get it rolling, and then we can put the motor in. First step was to press the brand new bearings into the linkages, swing arm and frame. Then we began by assembling the forks. You can see I'm assembling these triple clamps now, and it's a little bit of an awkward nut on the underside. The beauty about these Kincrome sockets is they can pivot a little bit when they're half engaged, which means I can get to this nut without scratching my beautiful Cerakote and anodized and Kashima parts. So thank you Kincrome for making great tools and supporting the channel. After all of that, the bike is finally a roller. Let's add a few more bits before we get cracking on the engine build. All the calipers had been stripped, Cerakoted, and were now getting rebuilt. Next up, I had to install this swing arm plug, but I wanted a new one to match my black swing arm. I modelled each side up using verniers and a ruler in CAD. Then I 3D printed new ones out of ASA, which is a pretty hardy material. And then you can see the new ones here, custom for my YZ500. I was starting to run out of things to do without putting the engine in. Time to start assembling the big 500.
I do a lot of motorbike maintenance myself. I've pretty much done it all, except I've never done a bottom end before, and this is absolutely not the one to learn on. This is quite an expensive kit, and we're down here at OnPoint, and Stel is going to help me put this one together, or pretty much do it for me, and I'm going to learn as we go. I cannot wait to see it together, and I cannot wait to put it on the bike. So we're leaning on Stel's years of experience to put this particularly special kit together.
The BRC kit uses parts of the YZ bottom end, including the gearbox. The gears were back from tumbling and they were all shiny and new, and it was time for Stel to reassemble them.
So the final test, and make sure they all marry up together.
What do they do?
Everyone's got a home there.
To press the bearings into the new cases, we were using some old-fashioned tricks, a pie oven to heat up the cases and a freezer to cool down the bearings. Turns out the cases needed a little bit of extra heating, hence this blowtorch. And once the bearings were in, Stel could install the crank. Then the newly freshened up gears could go in before the two halves of the cases could be mated up for the first time. And once the cases were together and we were cycling through the gears, we ran into our first problem.
Alrighty, so at this point we had to pause, and there's a bit of a problem with the shift fork. We tried to get it to shift into third or fourth, and it wouldn't work. So you can see here, this particular hole is nice, and you'd almost call it like a perfect fit. You know, it's tight, but it's not too tight, and it can slide in and out quite easily. Whereas these holes here are maybe just a little bit too tight, and the shift fork
won't slide, and therefore we're not able to change gears.
We're actually having to rectify this.
All right, plain and simple. We've mic'd our shafts here to be exactly 10 mil. So we're gonna make ourselves a 10 mil lapping mandrel. We're gonna throw some abrasive paste on it. We're gonna run it through those holes and see if we can open them up by microns, absolutely minimal amounts, maybe 10, 20 micron, just to get that nice sliding fit. It shouldn't be that hard. The cases are made out of aluminium. We think it'll cut pretty easy. We're just gonna put a couple of slices in this guy, give the lapping compound somewhere to go, somewhere to live. Once we've got a couple of cuts in it, we'll take it back to the lathe, get it down to our final size. That way we remove all the burrs from this cutting. Ooh, look how shiny it is. Lapping compound. You give that to the missus, she can put it on her fucking nails. Our original plan was to maybe chuck this up in a machine, get it all clocked in, you know, run it at a couple hundred RPM and lap it out. But we decided, why not try just spinning this by hand a few times and see if it opens up. I mean, we have to go so little. Let's start there. It's a lot easier. Here we go. Resistance.
This didn't really take that long, but we weren't thrilled with the surface finish. I think it probably would have been alright, but I didn't want to have to pull these cases apart again.
We want to improve the surface finish on these guys, so we decided to move from the polish, which was a bit coarse, to just running a 10 mil reamer through it. So really simply, clamp it to the table. I'm going to use this chuck and the actual original pin to just get a rough alignment of the hole. Once we get a rough alignment on the hole, we'll get the indicator in there and we'll dial it in perfect before we ream the hole out, clean up the surface finish.
Honestly, this really shouldn't be a problem when you're assembling one of these kits, and I did contact the manufacturer, but I didn't get a response, so I took it upon myself to fix it to keep this project moving along. Now the hole was perfectly aligned, it could be reamed out using the vertical mill. The shift forks now felt perfect in all the holes. Back to on-point suspension now, and Stel could continue assembling the bottom end. There was a big moment of truth here though. We needed to confirm that the repair job we'd just done was successful, and the only way to check was to reassemble the gears and to see if we could cycle through them all.
There we go. We're on.
And once again the crank could be put in and then the cases could be reassembled.
Neutral. 2, 3, 4, 5. All 5 gears, baby. Woo!
This is the counterbalance shaft which the original YZ500 engine doesn't have, and this will help bring the engine into 2026. With the stator side now assembled, Stel can flip the engine around and start working on the clutch side. Stel had been soaking the clutch plates in oil for a while now, and now that the clutch basket was installed, he could assemble the clutch.
So the bottom end for this motor is now assembled, and we're now back home in my shed, and I've got to do the top end and a few other little bits and pieces. And then we can finally put the motor into the bike, and I am looking really forward to doing that. Massive shout out to Stel and the team down at OnPoint. They've done an awesome job, and I wouldn't have been able to do the bottom end without them, or maybe I would have, but I possibly would have made a mistake. So huge shout out to them, and it is looking awesome. I don't think I've ever been so excited about a project, so let's get into it.
The lead time for a gasket on my clutch cover was ages, so I actually ended up 3D scanning and then 3D printing one out of TPU just in time for my other one to rock up, so I didn't use it in the end. Love that for me. Something that I've been doing since I was a little kid is putting a plastic bag down when you're putting on the worst design circlip of all time, aka the one on the piston, to stop it falling into the bottom end if you were to make a mistake. And trust me, I've learnt this one the hard way. Now the head was on, I could finally put the motor into the bike. This thing is a little bit bigger than a YZ500 motor, so it proved to be a little bit challenging, and I had to have a few goes at it. Now another go from the other side. You can see I had a problem with the head on the top of the frame, and I didn't realise it at the time, but it was the rear swing arm causing me grief. So I took the head off to have another go, and I still couldn't get it to work. And that's when I realised the swing arm had to come out to make this thing fit in. And once I'd put the engine bolts in, I put the head back on and we were finally back to having an assembled engine, only now it was in the bike. This engine is a kickstart and isn't compatible with any of the electric start kits made for a YZ. It does though have a decompression valve which makes it easier to kick. The engine is now in the bike and it's noticeably bigger than the original 250 engine. It really is a thing of beauty. While I had some issues with this kit, I'm still taken aback by it. It really is an impressive feat of engineering and manufacturing. The original radiator ports foul with the cylinder due to the size increase in the top end of the engine. They have to be modified so a line can pass around the back of the engine, which means some cutting and shutting and some TIG welding. The old ports have to be blanked off, and I have to weld new ones on which are about 1mm thick, and I'm a little bit nervous to say the least because I really don't want to stuff this up and blow holes in my radiator. With the old hole blanked off now, I could weld the new port on. Not my best work, but it could be much worse. Let's install these radiators. This is the new cooling hose I was talking about that has to wrap around the back of the engine. Cooling now done, let's install the exhaust. I'm still waiting on an airbox, but I'll put the subframe on anyway just for a mock-up because I'm busting to see the pipe installed on the engine. I'm installing the brake lever here and you can see that ratty looking clutch cover in the background. Fast forward a few days and I got it Cerakoted black. I just couldn't help myself. Looks way better, I reckon. And now I'm on to the final touches, like routing all the cables before I can start putting the plastics on, and then I can finally start to see what this bike is going to look like. I'm pretty damn excited. The YZ has come with a few different styles of plastic. These are a slightly newer style than what was on the 06. I was thinking about going the full restyle kit for a 2026 YZ, but I decided I'm impartial between this and the newer style, and I wanted to keep it common between both my bikes. Cooper from Native Concepts had made some custom graphics up for me. I decided to keep it clean and almost factory looking. Now you may be thinking, you spent all this money and time on a bike and the bike is still a kickstart? Well, all I'll say is stop being soft and be a man. Kick it once at the start of the ride and don't stall it. Pretty simple, really.
What's up is down, what's left is right. Chasing stars and holding you. I can't see the end, but we'll see it through.
As I was waiting for the final pieces, I could bleed the brakes. Remember that old janky seat that came on the bike? I got it retrimmed by SP Moto seats, and boy oh boy did it look good.
Be sure to keep the ground in sight.
Alrighty, so we're up to one of the final bits now, and this is the carburetor that came with the bike. Now, unfortunately, when I was trying to rebuild it, so this is the bottom overflow needle, and it's supposed to go into there, and it seems like you just can't buy this as a replacement part, and it's snapped, unfortunately. And then the needle seat in there is also really badly worn, and it seems like it's really hard to replace, or not possible. So then this is a brand new secondhand carby I got off eBay, and this one has now been rebuilt, ready to go on the bike, and hopefully we can fire this thing up. It's like the final piece, so super exciting. Not exactly unexpected, but I was filling this bike up for the first time with coolant. I've used the pink coolant. You can see there's just like a little pinhole there. So before we start this thing, I'm gonna have to fix that. So out comes that radiator hose. I actually might be able to weld that in position, which would be rather nice.
First step is to drain the coolant that I just put in, and then I can crack out the TIG. Now that was fixed, I could fill the bike with oil, then it would actually be ready to fire up. Let me just tell you why I picked a YZ for this build before the big build reveal. I've picked the YZ500 platform for this build because it is tried, tested, and ultra reliable. It performs insanely well despite its age. The suspension out of the box is better than a new $20,000 Euro bike. These bikes have essentially been the same since 2005, so there is a plethora of aftermarket parts available for them, making it a perfect bike to do a project on. I also own a YZ500X, and I've had that for the past 8 years or so. And I have so many parts for YZs lying around, and I honestly just intend to keep running YZs going forward at this point. Actually, I'm not going to get the bike started in this video. Sorry to disappoint. I will, however, have another video dedicated to testing, tuning, and riding this thing. For now, let me show you how the bike turned out with a series of photos. I've never got proper photos when I've finished a project before, but this time I decided to go and do it, and I'm glad I did. This bike will get ridden and it will never ever look this nice again. Here it is, my YZ500, the culmination of months of hard work by not only me, but a few very special dedicated people. Although there wasn't much design, engineering and fabrication work involved with this bike, which is normally what I make videos about, I actually really did enjoy this project. There was a lot of problem solving and I found it challenging despite the lack of custom work, which made it extremely rewarding overall. The 10-year-old version of me would be really proud of me and what I've done with this bike, and I wouldn't have been able to do something like this when I started the channel 5 years ago. I may never do another dirt bike project again. I don't have the desire to build any other bikes at this point in time, so I'm glad to be proud of my efforts, and when I take a step back to look at the bike, I really want to keep this thing in my living room. Not bad for an engineer, especially given we can't use tools. Hopefully I'll be able to keep this one forever, as it's pretty special to me. One of the many reasons I built this tax-deductible 500cc two-stroke is to promote my up-and-coming motorcycle rack, which is nearing completion, and I should have an update for you all in the next few months if it all goes well. If you enjoy engineering, design, and fabrication content, or just want to see this bike in action, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really does help with the mystical YouTube algorithm. Thank you.